My photographic career came very close to not happening because I went to school to be a writer. I was convinced I was going to be a sports writer, and I was literally forced to become acquainted with photography via the curriculum. It sounds a bit corny, I imagine, but the camera just felt natural in my hands. I always describe certain assignments as gateway assignments. I get an assignment that really terrifies me, and I like those, even though they're uncomfortable. I like them because I know that that's going to force me to grow or push me in a direction that I have yet to go in photographically. I mean, one of the more, I guess, significant or fairly lengthy projects that I did was I took the clothes off the Olympic team in 1996, and I proposed that to life. I was a staff photographer there, and my editor looked at me and said, "You can talk these people out of their clothes?" I said, "Yeah, I think so." That's an enormous risk, because I didn't know that I could do that. But you start and you work your way towards it, and you explain yourself well, and you be very tenacious, and you stand your ground. And eventually it came around to be, one of the largest portfolios that Life ever ran. The only time in their history they ever ran 4 covers in a month. So I'm always interested in the obsession that lies behind things. I'm always interested in what drives a human being to attempt perfection, what drives a human being to endless lengths, to carve out an extra 1/10 of a second spread over 100 meters. All those things, to me, are much more intriguing than who wins or loses. It's an avenue or an escape for me in lots of ways, an expression of my imagination, and the opportunity to do something cool, the opportunity to do something that very few people ever get a chance to do, in fact, may never get a chance to do again. Like, I've climbed the Empire State Building, the antenna on the Empire State Building. I've climbed it 4 times. And that completely was generated by my notion of how do I make a different picture of somebody changing a light bulb. And the story was for the National Geographic, and it was called The Power of Light. And you start thinking about, how do I relate this to the reader? Well, everybody's changed a light bulb, but very few people have ever changed a light bulb at the top of perhaps the most famous building in the world. So you have to kind of just figure out that you're going to be able to do this and go after it. That picture ran in the story. It closed the story. And that, to me, I look up at that now. I drive around New York, and I look up at that light, and I realize not too many people have ever been there. I feel very strongly about the responsibility we have as photographers, because we are this blessed or privileged few that do partake in this kind of mystical, wild thing called photography. But the flip side of that is a very real responsibility to then take that privileged position and turn it into a benefit for those who can't be there with us. I feel very acutely the pressure of all those pairs of eyes who are looking at the National Geographic, who can't be backseat with me flying with the Blue Angels. Yeah, it's cool, it's fun, but at the same time, damn, I better do a good job, because if I don't, then I've failed a lot of people. Certainly, for all of us, the events of 9/11 was a passage. And it certainly was for anyone in and around New York, as I have been for, my whole career. And the days after that terrible day, I remember sitting around and just kind of stewing about things. I started thinking about what I could possibly do, and then it hit me that I might be able to use this particular camera that I had worked with once prior, a very unique camera, the only one of its kind in the world. It was a life-size Polaroid camera, and it lived on the Lower East Side of New York, which strategically was very close to Ground Zero. And we started circulating word of mouth about this project that was hopefully going to do people some good. And eventually, over a 3-week period, we photographed over 300 New Yorkers. And we ultimately produced a document that became a book and a show called Faces of Ground Zero. It ended up helping to raise about $2 million, which was donated to the relief of downtown public education in New York. The impression that was left upon me is indelible, and the fact that they made the leap of faith and confidence to, in that desperate time, to take time out of their day and come to this studio and take a picture. In those days, everybody was looking to be part of something, to share something, to feel connected, to feel like they could tell a story and have that story become part of the history of that time. I tend to resist labels. I tend to not associate myself with being a photojournalist necessarily, or a commercial photographer. I simply call myself a photographer. And at the end of the day, I'm not even a photographer, really. I'm a storyteller. And that, to me, is our highest calling. I tell stories, and whatever that story, wherever it leads me, and whatever I have to do to accommodate the needs of that story, that's what I'm willing to do. And that can be a 3-day effort to create one photograph, or it can be just floating through someone's day and shooting picture after picture after picture of the unfolding events of that day without hindrance or interference or control. All of it's fair game. Well, you look at this picture, a totally unforced moment. This young girl seeing a horse. She's blind. And I don't recall breathing when I saw that scene. I was desperate to get that on film. Desperate, and you see those scenes sometimes, and there's something happening in front of your lens, and you literally just go into a trance or stop breathing or whatever it is physiologically. You're just reacting to the fact that this is absolutely necessary to record. To me, a really, really powerful photograph is like counterpoint in music. And when you hear that, or when you see it, there's an emotional shift that occurs. And it's seismic, and it's interior to your structure. And you might not even be aware of it right at that moment, but once you see that photograph, you'll never be the same again. Ever. To me, light is language. That I view light as an expression, as language, that has all of the components that we generally associate with either the spoken or the written word. It has emotion, it has, a timbre, a quality, it has inflection, it has tone, it has range, and all those things can combine to produce or evoke an emotion. You have to be able to speak with light. You have to be able to manage it, direct it, shape it. You have to think your way into, the way light might express itself in relationship to the human face. Shooting on location is a house of cards. One little slip and the whole thing can come down. So I bring a lot of stuff with me oftentimes because I try to forestall that possibility. I try to take a look at a job and see what could go wrong. When would it go wrong? How could it go wrong? And I try to backstop myself as best I can. Not always successfully. You can't predict, where failure will step in from the shadows and grab you by the neck and throttle you and throw you down on the ground and dash your hopes and crush your spirits. But that's just part of being a location photographer. I actually embrace and celebrate that, because here's the thing. This is the wonderful thing about photography, is that we can be incredibly prepared. We can throw money at a job. We can go out there with the most sophisticated equipment in the world, and our pictures stink because photography rises up and kicks us right in the teeth. And that's the beautiful thing about it. This is not an easy thing to do, and it never will be. And that's part of what makes it so wonderful to do.